The foot-and-mouth outbreak has devastated the farming community and has brought the disruption of almost every countryside activity, including special stage rallying. But fans and competitors got their first taste of their sport since February with a brand new event.
Well, they say at Knockhill that you don't just get all 4 seasons in one day, you get them in the course of an hour. But today for the UK Rally Challenge, the weather couldn't be better. It's dry, it's bright, hopefully it will stay dry for the rest of the day. And there are drivers here from all over Britain and Ireland. And if they get into trouble, well, they can always call on the army.
It should be a good event. It's going to be good for spectators and it's going to be good for the competitors. I think it's a good circuit. So I think there'll be a lot of overtaking, which rally drivers are not used to. So we'll need to watch out for that. There might be a bit of dodgems going on for some of the corners. You know, we'll both want the same corner at the same time, so we're not used to that. So hopefully it'll be okay as things go on.
The circuit looks good. It's going to be a little bit difficult with the splits and that, but I mean, it's a really good stage, you know.
I was up a few days ago and we tested the circuit out just in a safety point and found it very exciting. So we'll get out there and get a little adrenaline fix, I think.
All 8 stages used the circuit, perimeter roads and specially laid tracks. The opening 2 were 4.5 miles long, a mixture of gravel and tarmac. First away, Irish tarmac champion Kenny McKinstry at the wheel of his Subaru World Rally car. His closest rival was former Scottish Rally champion Raymond Munro from Inverness in another Subaru. McKinstry set a storming early pace with fastest times on the opening stages. David Greer threw his Toyota around the tight slalom. But there was no holding McKinstry, who already had a 9-second lead. Each stage was run in 2 laps at 30-second intervals, and this meant he was met on the circuit by Munro on his first lap. No punches were pulled as they both fought for the corner. Munro got through first and put some space between himself and the Irishman. An unfortunate cone was an early victim of the battle. Behind them, a wide line for Barry Johnson on the perimeter track. Munro put up a strong challenge but simply couldn't match McKinstry's times. Barry Groundwater from Stonehaven made a mess of this early bend in his Mitsubishi. Further down the field, Alan Barr from Barrhead got the most from his Group N showroom class Subaru. It was to be a short event for David Greer. He picked up early bodywork damage but then retired before the end of stage 2. Another of the large Irish contingent was Owen Lamont from Belfast in another Subaru. In car with Raymond Munro, he was hard on the tail of Craig Needleton's Hyundai Coupe, and already dust was becoming a problem. Back on the tarmac again, Munro dispensed with Middleton, but then Greer joined in the fray and trackside markers were sent flying. The event was also a counter in the National Puma Championship, but it didn't go well for Guy Wilkes with gearbox problems early on. Sitting alongside Gary Adam in his Mitsubishi was his father Gordon, and the pair were delighted to be 7th overall after just 2 stages. We joined them as they chased Gordon Smith's Escort.
Plus 100 to right 2 and to left 3, right 6, plus 250. 250, keep right and to right 8, plus 450. Go, you'll be cutting off now. 450. Aye. And to right now, 450 and to right 9. Right 9, here. And to right 9 again.
Meanwhile, Sean Woffenden almost beat Neil Edwards to the corner in the Puma series. Phil Walker from Killern has been rallying in his Mazda for many years and he still gets a great deal out of it. Neil Edwards had John Brodie from Lanark hard on his tail, and it was only a matter of time before he squeezed past by cutting the bend. Paul Ben let things slide here, and another marker went flying. The Mark II Escort is a classic of British rallying, but Ricky Wheeler from East Kilbride was horrified at how quickly he was going through tyres. Danny McGinley had trouble all day controlling his rear-wheel drive Peugeot. Tom Hine from Portlethen took a bumpy shortcut to save a second in another Peugeot. George Grieve from Tillicoultry almost lost it on the tarmac, which let Tom Morris from Alva fill his rear view mirror. They're the best of friends, but bitter opponents on the stage. Mark Wheeler is a young rally hopeful who's being supported in the sport by the McRae Family Scholarship. And he put much effort in at the wheel of his Puma, but there was plenty of competition. Danny McGinley still hadn't mastered the art of going round the corners. Paul Benn put his foot to the floor, cut the bend and got past Andrew Nisbet's Vauxhall. A misjudgment here though for Grayson Glover from Dalbeattie and his Vauxhall Corsa. Lucky Mascot Woody on the front of Alan Leishman's Audi was not to prove much use. And Grayson Glover made another mistake here by going on the wrong side of the cones. Leishman's luck was out with this front puncture, which slowed him down and allowed Rodney White to pass in his Sunbeam. And a diversion onto the grass for Tristan Pye in his Proton Compact. Twisting and snaking another Mark II Escort in the hands of George Anderson from Duns. Leishman's tyre started to disintegrate, and with it, any hopes of a good finish. Brothers Paul and Andy Ballantyne have been rallying for only a year, and it looked as though Andy needed to perfect his handbrake turns. David Cochrane's Escort is a more recent vintage, but he too seemed to have some trouble with the handling. And Edward Pugh's car almost went the same way, but he managed to hold on and make it through the gap. The team of Army Land Rovers at the back of the field had a competition of their own, but James Clark would have done better with less off-roading. That same bend and gate proved quite a challenge. This is Mark Roper, who had to rectify his misdemeanour. Certainly the unlikeliest competitor was Kevin Johnson's tiny Daihatsu, but he worked it very hard. Stages 3 and 4 were 6 miles each, with 2 laps of the perimeter track and the circuit, and it was all to play for. McKinstry was determined to consolidate his early lead and build up as big a gap as he could from his nearest rivals. The four-wheel drive and raw power of the Subaru served him well as he guided his machine round the tight and twisty perimeter track. Raymond Munro had lost 9 seconds on the first 2 stages to the Irishman, and already he'd picked up some body damage. And if you think rallying's easy, just see how hard Munro has to work. On stage 3, he was a further 7 seconds down on McKinstry as he fought for grip and traction on the loose gravel surface. Trevor Moore started well with 4th fastest on the first 2 stages, but here he was held up by another car and dropped back to 5th fastest. With all 4 wheels locked, Munro was lucky to regain control and make it through the double gates. with a sideways drift at Clark's Corner, McKinstry pressed home his lead. In third place on stage 3, Barry Johnson was a serious threat to the leaders in his Subaru Impreza. But up front, McKinstry gave nothing away and Munro was forced to chase his dust. A disaster for Gary Adam, who blamed his co-driver for sending him round the stage for an extra lap. All attention was on the Subarus. McKinstry was way out ahead, but Munro put everything into it, and here he had a face-to-face fight with Barry Johnson. Trevor Moore's Escort took a punishment, and here on stage 3, it discarded its wheel arch lining. It stayed dry and sunny, and a steady wind helped to clear some of the dust. This is Barry Johnson as he peeled off the tarmac onto the loose surface of the old rallycross track. Barry Groundwater was lucky here on the hairpin. He went wide on the bend and actually drove over a concrete culvert, but survived without any damage. There was more bad news though for Gary Adam, who suffered a time-consuming puncture on stage 4. The layout of the stages brought cars together to fight for the bends. Here, John Brody's Metro 6R4 just managed to stay ahead of Trevor Moore's Escort, but the Irishman snapped at his heels. Alan Barr stepped up his pace as he got the hang of the gravel and tarmac mix. By stages 3 and 4, he made it into the top 10. In contrast, George Grieve made some errors and dropped out of the leaders' list. Bumping and bouncing, Barry Groundwater managed to keep his Mitsubishi on track. Owen Lamont had been late with his entry, which accounted for his lowly number 78. Here he scored among the fastest times. Munro tried hard, almost too hard at times, and here he almost threw everything away. He was lucky to survive. It's an experience having an Impreza filling your rear mirror. Steve Palmer in the Mitsubishi had Owen Lamont right on his tail. It's another Subaru duel, and Munro got into the bend a hair's breadth ahead of McKinstry. But he almost tried too hard and very nearly lost it to the Irishman. Let's watch the continuing battle from McKinstry's viewpoint. Grieve's Escort was certainly the worst for wear. Mark Wheeler was lucky not to lose some of his panels on the tyres at the slalom. Munro had also been in the wars with front and side damage scars on his Subaru. Barry Groundwater was lucky to leave only a small mark on his Mitsubishi in this brush with the barrier. Parts of the track were starting to cut up, which made the going even more laborious. Here, George Grieve has McKinstry right behind him, but the Escort is no match for the Subaru. With the new gearbox, Guy Wilkes made better progress and took 4 seconds over his rival Sean Woffenden. Barry Groundwater got it very badly wrong with a disastrous diversion into the undergrowth. The scattered tyres proved an extra hazard for the following cars. He made a mess, but carried on. The merging of the 2 laps threw up some interesting confrontations. The Metro of John Brody loses out the bend and almost altogether. Owen Lamont was just 10 seconds slower than McKinstry on stage 4 and equalled Trevor Moore's time on the stage. Simon Selby took his Puma back on the tarmac just as Lamont screamed to the corner. At times the dust was choking for the spectators, but for the drivers it was as dense as fog. But David Henderson had no such excuse for getting it so badly wrong in this encounter with the straw bales. And it wasn't helped when he couldn't find reverse. Things didn't go well for George Grieve. He almost made it round the bend, but went wide and then stalled the Escort's engine. He could only sit and watch as the rest of the field sailed by. He begged the marshals to get him going again, but there was trouble under the bonnet. Trouble too for Mark Wheeler with a front puncture and a flapping tyre. Neil Edwards had a good day in his Puma, which is more than could be said for Alistair Thorburn, who gave this balletic display, but managed to hold on. Dropping his number plate, Keith White was lucky not to leave the entire car hanging on the gatepost. And some new shock absorbers might be on Ken Murray's shopping list very soon. And that tyre on Raymond McLaughlin's Subaru didn't last much longer either. In front of the crowds, Robert Chalmers gave a perfect display of how not to do it. And in another car, Ian Forgan from Ely at least kept two wheels on the ground. Chalmers and co-driver Stephen Booth were safe and sound, which is more than could be said for their car. A wide slide for Peter Garrow from Elgin in his Mark II Escort, but a tidy entry into the slalom. An interesting modification to Matthew Hardy's car, with a bumper with a limited life. The car competition was intense, and Mark Roper was lucky that this slide wasn't terminal. That's Chalmers and Booth on the long walk home. The cars left many mementos and a clearing up job for the marshals. This is Grayson Glover again, who did well to hold onto this sideways slide. So, the halfway point, and time to reflect.
Yeah, we're in the top 10, and we were catching the Hyundai in that last stage. We were almost about to pass him, and the car just stopped. So, and it wouldn't restart, and we fiddled about with it, and after about 30 seconds it restarted.
So what was the problem?
I don't know. Started motor, I think, but we'll have to have a look and see if we can fix it.
When you catch anybody on the dust because of the proliferation of motor cars out on that circuit, it gets very tricky because the track's narrow and there are tricky little potholes and things that you can ding a rim on and whatnot. But the tarmac bits are fantastic. You can really get boogieing on them.
The lunch halt gave the marshals time to reorganise the route for stages 5 and 6, which were a reverse run of the morning's tests. Munro was refreshed and recharged and leapt into the lead for the first time ahead of McKinstry after the Irishman suffered a time-consuming spin. But he did have the odd scrape along the way. Let's see that again from inside the car. Barry Johnson had had a great morning with times well up amongst the leaders, but it wasn't to continue. McKinstry's spin had cost him a disastrous 30 seconds and a broken exhaust which trailed on the ground in a shower of sparks. It would be a straightforward repair, but he'd have to work hard to regain the top spot. Munro was jubilant and finished stage 5 an amazing 22 seconds ahead of his nearest rival. Squeezing between the tyres, Trevor Moore had his own battle with fellow Irishman Owen Lamont, and he was winning. But it all went horribly wrong for Munro. He'd got the lead, but then his transmission started to falter and then gave up altogether on stage 6. Phil Walker's consistently fast times took him well up the leaderboard, but Barry Johnson was 3 places ahead. A mistaken extra lap early on had dropped John Brodie down the field, but he fought back and set second fastest time on stage 5. Gordon Smith turned up the heat to try to regain lost time. It was looking good for Barry Johnson with consistently fast times. Paul Crossan finished a disappointing 32nd after early electrical problems. A wide slide and a severe bump for John Brodie with resulting damage to the Metro's spoiler, but it was a blown cylinder head gasket which forced his retirement after this stage. Red Barry had a problem. He had Kenny McKinstry's Subaru buzzing him from behind. There was no competition really. The unique element of this event was the close contact of the competitive cars played out in front of the crowd. Here Barry Johnson is locked in mortal combat with Craig Middleton's Hyundai, which went on to finish an excellent 13th overall and first in class. Sean Woofenden was untidy here, scattering the tyres, but Gary Adam made a neat job of cutting this corner. Red Barry had the elderly Mazda of Phil Walker on his tail. But that was nothing compared to the problems of Gordon Smith, who was fighting a puncture and gearbox problems. The Walker and Barry battle was resolved, with the Mazda getting the upper hand. The close contact competition was intense and it wasn't confined to one part of the stage. While one battle was going on the outside track, another was in full flow somewhere else on the circuit. The McRae Scholarship car in the hands of Mark Wheeler was still in one piece, but it was a close call at this gate post. Danny McGinley continued to have trouble with the bends, and congestion and swirling dust made the conditions decidedly difficult. McKinstry and Munro looked back.
Basically just towards the end of that last stage, I heard a rattle. I thought it was actually a piston that was going. I was looking in the mirror to see if there was any smoke. It sounded like an engine rattle, but it appears to be in the transmission. The gearbox is step off or something like that. It's gone in the gearbox, which is a bit unfortunate because obviously Kenny had a wee spin in the last stage and we managed to get in front of him now. So he's got it all his own way again now. So there'll be no more dicing to me and him in the corners now. So that's a bit unfortunate.
I'm not sure what we dropped to Raymond on the second last stage. I think it was probably 20 seconds or something like that. So we ended up in the gravel trap and actually stopped. The marshals actually pushed us out. So
how's the event shaping up?
Yeah, it's very good. I mean,
the format's still very good.
Yeah,
brilliant format.
Brilliant.
So the final two stages with a reverse run of the opening stages to give 4.5 miles of closing competition. With Munro's departure, McKinstry was back in the lead by over a minute. Trevor Moore said he'd had a super day, second overall and ahead of rival Lamont. Gary Adam couldn't replace the time lost earlier. And this is where it all ended for Barry Johnson, disabled by broken transmission. Gary Adam added to Barry's misery by misjudging the bend and nudging the sick Subaru. Phil Walker had a great day with a superb 4th overall, even though here he was held up by the escort of Gordon Smith. Group N winner Alan Barr, 6th overall. Held up by other cars, McKinstry flew to the finish. Gordon Smith finished 12th. While Sean Woffenden cut a few corners to win the Puma class. Retirement just before the end for Mark Wheeler with a burst radiator. And even at the end, Danny McGinley still hadn't mastered the corners, but he certainly gave plenty of entertainment. Only 3 wheels, but a finish for Barry Clark. And over his time limit, but still driving just for the fun of it, Alan Leishman. Beneath the masts of Knockhill, the role of the day went to Andrew Davidson. Let's just see that again. Not a scratch and only their ego dented. And a great day was had by all.
If the weather sticks, it will be back.
I think it was brilliant. Yeah, brilliant day, really good. I haven't had a day.
It's a very good format. It's a good mix for tarmac and forest chaps because you've got a good balance between the loose and the tar.
It's a real nice driving course and you have to have your wits about you.
I love this. This is great. It's a great challenge. I'm absolutely on it, you know.
Champagne then for the worthy winners Kenny McKinstry and co-driver John McGaffin. And an Irish 1-2-3 with Phil Walker the leading Scot.